Issue 67. It's baffling that it starts with Sonic seeing Surge with Amy, when everyone would have assumed she would have had her first interaction with each of Sonic's friends be about trying to kill them. Anybody would assume that it would start with showing her plan to infiltrate Restoration HQ. But apparently it was a lot easier on a lazy writer to only show this in a flashback, where Surge is being confusingly nice to Sonic because apparently she's fine with pretending and an expert on hiding how embarrassed she is that she failed to kill him. I would get behind this if this was meant to be the ultimate long-term plan for her, since she won't do anything new in a fight again. But the cynic in me assumes that it's just temporary so she could kill everyone here. The best way to predict what an issue in this comic will be like is to assume the worst. Amy and Surge insists that she's planning to come here for a fresh new start. There's still the logic problem of, why isn't the supposedly smart Kit or one of the many people in this building thought to look for Surge and Kit in the missing persons database on a computer and tell them they found them, instantly getting their lives back to normal? The comic referenced that people were reported missing after the metal virus, so the Chaotix were in charge of looking for them. So people do get reported missing in this world, and there's no reason minors would be the exception. But it's been enough months for me to figure out that Surge might have been reminded that minors have to get educated by listening to other people, and decided that doing what she needs to discover her past wouldn't be worth that, and told Amy about her decision. It's sloppy and lazy to have her drop a major part of her character because of an off-screen thought that never gets explained, but it makes sense because if she's still brainwashed to scheme against the good guys, she can't choose anything over doing that. It's needlessly depressing that they give up on their chances to get jobs. But if they're happier this way, that's good, and she always has the option to go back home. But the only way they could always get to fight Eggman is if he made himself immortal. Surge justifies to Sonic that their last fight with him was a close call. If she had a brain in this comic instead of just being a tool for the writer, she would learn from that. And her being absent for so long implied that she did, because she wasn't hunting down his friends after her arc, when it'd take seconds for her to find out where they're most likely to be since they're celebrities. Kit's angry expression doesn't inspire trust in her to be telling the truth though. It's too bad, because I got to the point where I never wanted to see them be villains again. All of their story potential has been exhausted because they already did everything they can do in a fight. All that's left for them to do outside of that is the lazy, predictable idea of having them work for Clutch and every other villain. And there's no real tension because they'll never even put any of the heroes in the hospital, just give them bruises that wear off in no time. They're the most uncreative, pointless antagonists in the comic because everyone else there but the Zeddy has tons of creative variety in what they could do. The only reason they're back is it's much easier to use them a whole bunch than come up with new ideas. Why think about what new invention or plan Eggman could have when you could have them? I don't think they could do anything to prevent her from sticking around because of her powers. So Sonic warned people wouldn't make a difference anyways, other than causing her to hurt people who try to throw her out. And he thinks it'll be worth the gamble, not even considering any of his friends getting hurt if this backfires. If he has considered it, that's even worse. So I don't think he has, because it'd be out of character for the Sonic from the games to not care about his friends. Are there convenience posters saying that anybody homeless and willing to contribute to the cause could go live in the Restoration building? There's a lot of homeless people. So how would there be any open positions available for the Restoration if they just give anyone who shows up a bedroom? It's not explained what the people in the Restoration who aren't going on missions do, so I don't know if it requires special skills the average homeless person wouldn't have. I don't think it does, so now I have to assume there were barely any homeless people around Restoration HQ. Or more likely it was that big that after employing all of the homeless people, it still had jobs and rooms available for mimicking them. It goes back in time to the Sigma base and explains that because it has no power, out of nowhere, every perishable bit of food in it is rotting. If it has no power, why is it completely well lit? There has to be a hole in the ceiling to let the light in. But I thought the only hole in the base was in that one room they aren't in. The only reason the base would have no power is if the power generator was capped in the place and get destroyed so that it could escape it quickly. And that'd be quite a coincidence. I have a gut feeling that power generators don't tend to be on the highest part of a building, that they'd be more likely to be in its basement. Plus, Kit said the base was on reserve backup power, so that means it has 2 generators. But apparently he destroyed the backup generator. I don't even know what happened to the first one. It just barely is believable, but it still feels ridiculous. There's no way the base would be falling apart around them though, because only 1 tower was damaged, not a load-bearing wall for the whole place. Surge refuses to live off roots and berries, and she reminds him that he's the smart one. Then they hear a noise and assume Eggman's the one damaging their base, and they get faced with badniks while Surge all of a sudden looks bright for no reason, when she doesn't always look like that when fighting. Ruff says that's their tech, and Surge spin dashes at him and his brother. She would have done that before either of them said anything, if the logic is that she's the type to interrupt. She threatens them with another dark Scourge line, and go figure they've got the technology because of Clutch. It's fast-pacing to not show us a scene where Ruff and Tumble meet him, but it just makes me wonder how in the world they met him. How do they know where to go find him? How is his face not on a wanted poster? Clutch trying to hire Surge is so predictable that it's lame. Both of them are green. It sure jumped at the chance to write that the issue she came back. And obviously if Ruff and Tumble were broken out of prison by Clutch, he would definitely be on a wanted poster, and he definitely wouldn't have been able to make a deal with Jewel, let alone establish a company that could hire Mimic. By that logic, you can say that Starline wasn't made a fugitive after he caused a prison break. Why would he already know Starline wasn't here anymore? Why would that be something Jewel would know, but not anything important? So the hero's bothered spreading the word about that, I guess just to reassure everybody. The next page is really boring. He just says what you'd expect, saying stuff we already know about him. He tells her to help him with his plan to steal the Restoration. How does he expect to steal a building? He couldn't be thinking he could steal Jewel's job as leader of the Restoration. It is realistic that this is why they went there, but I hate how depressing the idea is that they'll get themselves sent to jail if they actually get themselves exposed as working against them. Sonic's smart enough to want Amy to keep an eye on them at least. It's trying to apologize for turning into a cynical version of Steven Universe with her, because now that it looks like she has humored him, he's exercising caution about it. It's not an apology that works though, because he's still gonna endanger his friends by telling them to trust her, when even he doesn't trust her. I like that he almost instinctively pet Kent. I'm surprised to see Silver here. I thought he banished himself and wouldn't be back in the Restoration until after Mimic was exposed, because he was so ashamed after convincing himself he hallucinated. Why does Sonic instantly tell Silver Surge tried to kill him a couple of times as a cheerful introduction? Blaze and Silver are planning to bring crops to Missouri because they learned that had poor crops this season. The writer wasn't inspired enough to make an entire plot about actually showing them hanging out together alone. Why would there not be a missing persons database just because we weren't told there was? But it's still possible for there to be poor crops in a season because the technology for perfect crops like greenhouses doesn't exist. Apparently crop failures can happen when we weren't told that they existed. Blaze lampshades that Sonic keeps making friends out of his enemies, and a page bores me by referencing the other time Sonic befriended his enemies. I don't know why Flynn keeps thinking this is a good argument when Surge and Kid are brainwashed, so clearly there's no reason for him to think this is a good argument. Sonic once again looks unlikable by praising himself that he's likable once you get to know him. Well, right above him is a panel of Sonic using Shadow's trauma against him and gaslighting him as a last resort. Even though in the Japanese script of SE2, he heard Gerald say that he completely controls Shadow's memories, and that's why he ended up trying to destroy the world. So he knew that Shadow wasn't responsible for his actions of trying to get the world destroyed, and intentionally let him feel guilty about that to get his way. I'm so impressed because it was competent and smart of him, but you'd think Shadow would have just punched him in the face for that, so you'd think it wouldn't have been smart. I have a very hard time remembering any time he was likable in this comic. He is usually just smirking. Blaze expects me to believe Silver and her aren't affiliated with the Restoration, even though anyone can join and they have special powers. And Blaze is here indefinitely. Amy reassures her that Surge is welcome to leave anytime she wants, and no one's gonna force her to do anything she doesn't want here. Somehow she's surprised by this. It's a building full of goody two-shoes to the point where they don't do background checks. It would be so much more natural if Amy was the one trying to redeem enemies all the time. Then it would come off as actually sincere, instead of from someone smirking. I can't believe I'm expected to be interested in Amy's boring exposition about the Restoration. Why is all the world building centered just here? Surge says tech is more kids thing, even though it's only been shown to be about programming and using his pack specifically. So far there's no proof he can actually invent anything. Kid doesn't trust Belle's boss because he's an engineer. Belle sees them, and somehow she's written to just say Dr. Starline made them as her only objection to them being here, and not the fact that they're brainwashing and trying to kill Sonic. And Surge would know everyone would see her lips move to whisper to Kate with a smirk, even if they don't hear her say good about this, making it obvious she's still bland villainous. Whisper refuses to trust her while the rest of her team does. Vanillin would rather trust Surge than Silver, someone she remembers saved the world from the metal virus. It's so weird that Surge tells Whisper she's smart to not trust her and encourage her to aim her Wisp-On at her all day. She's supposed to be keeping their trust, remember? How does she not realize this should give her away? And once again, they're gonna get accepted into the Freedom Fighters with no background check, just like Fiona with Archie. Surge again isn't even trying to be subtle, saying it'd be a shame if someone burnt this place to the ground with a smirk. Sonic just snarks that something would happen to the idiot who would try to do this. It'd be cool if this changed her mind instead of her literally always being a bland villain character because she was based on Scourge, even though Metal Sonic fills her role too, and she was just brainwashed to be this way, so she obviously deserves better. Don't have a character with such a tragic backstory and expect nobody to want a happy ending for her. Still don't care about Mimic's dialogue, he still wastes the panels. Nothing he says is interesting if he's just a one-dimensional cardboard cutout. He could be saying that his motive is to create a giant hot dog for all it matters. Mimic says he got them a shared room since they're codependent. Surge is impressed that he showed even the slightest of snark. I never pictured her to be the type to actually appreciate someone hating her because I thought she was a complete hothead. I can't believe she has the self-control to happily tease Sonic instead of literally always acting like she wants to kill him. You'd think she would be grumpy around him. It makes sense if the brainwashing were off by this point, and she just wasn't willing to be introspective enough to realize it yet because she's too proud to admit she changed her mind even to herself, and she could still hate him for her own reasons. She literally said, "I can't," about the idea of not trying to kill him. Whatever happened to that? Here's the thing, if she can't choose a decision over trying to kill Sonic, why is she able to choose to act like she's happy around Sonic? Mimic tells them not to play too nice with the others. Why? Why does he think he needs to tell them that? Oh, because he just does stuff for the evils. Mimic says they'll hit their target while their guard's down. What target? Jewel? Even if she dies, it won't get Clutch to replace her. They'll put it to a vote. Who would want a guy with creepy black eyes as the leader of the Restoration? I assume he'll get dealt with in one issue. It would really suck if he didn't learn from the reception of the King Naugus arc and had him be there for an entire arc. This is so cringeworthy to see. Mimic can't do anything because he only attacks with a knife, and this is a kids' comic. So she looks stupid for thinking she had to wait to meet up with him to get backed up so she could win, because he can't do anything. And I doubt Clutch will, with no special powers. I know the kid might blame Sonic for how his life went because she did, and that does have it make sense that he'd like this plan because Surge is a bad influence, but I still find him unbearable. He was nothing but polite and caring to her, It doesn't suit someone who used to be a normal kid and was just brainwashed into this. This is too dark a concept to drag on this long. If we really have to choose between them always being like this and never seeing them again, I wish we'd never see them again. If there was enough slapstick in the comic, it wouldn't have their haters wishing that. She doesn't know where else she can go to live, and we haven't been told there's soup kitchens in this world. I naturally assume there are, but some people have been assuming there's no internet in this world, even though there's an eggnet and sentient robots. So apparently us not being shown something can be evidence of it not existing. Brussels sprouts don't exist in this world because we never saw them before. But there's a lot of things that get revealed to exist in this world that didn't imply they existed before. Like the warp topaz. I'm only doubting she'll be shown a soup kitchen because that'd be the writers caring about her and making sense. You just draw attention to the problem for everyone when you have her say she's not living off roots and berries. I don't really want kids to go through that. Of course, some people are gonna have compassion for people who are only brainwashed into being villains. That's like expecting you to not care about the Robians. Even if she threatened someone into letting her live with them, he would have to be allowed to leave every day to go to work to keep paying for groceries and the rent. And they wouldn't be able to stop him from calling the police. It could explain that he won't do that because he wouldn't want her to shock to death every cop that shows up, which she could warn him she'd do in advance. And if he has too much of a conscience to poison the food he knows they're gonna eat, he won't. And most people won't. So, they're gonna be fine. So I wish the comic would explain that instead of being infuriatingly bleak, acting like we won't care if they starve to death. I don't know how the writers don't realize how cruel it is to have a little kid and teenager permanently stay brainwashed into being villains, and have to deal with constant punishment for it. The writers are victim blaming them if they think they deserve to be just misery bait. Or if they don't think that, then they think most of the fans do. But again, there's a right way to do that, and the comic isn't slapsticky enough to do it. Why not go all out instead of trying to pander to everyone and just boring everyone? People only want to see Surge so they could see her run around Sonic and hit him. There's some value in building up suspense, but why waste an entire issue on that with barely anything happening? The writers aren't better than Starline by not seeing Surge as her own person and instead as a replacement for Scourge she was brainwashed into. I've read that Flynn wanted to write that she and Kit were made from scratch, and Sega didn't want anyone but Gerald to do that. But with how they're being written, Sega made the wrong call. Because their backstories create a dangling plot thread by existing, and made it so their villain phase can overstay its welcome. If they never had a past as normal good people to go back to, they won't have this problem where they aren't meant to be this way, and you're expecting it to be on a time limit, because it's a kid's comic. But just because Flynn disagrees with Sega doesn't make it canon that he said they don't have pasts, when they'd have to be made from scratch for that to be possible. Canon is what's in the official source material. You don't want to start believing that it's canon that the wizards in Harry Potter used to go to the bathroom in their pants because J.K. Rowling tweeted that. Or that Scourge slept with Bunny because Panders tweeted that. It's better for writers not to talk on the internet. I don't want a comic to be even worse because of what a writer is saying on a podcast. It can make things worse for both the haters and the fans who would have been looking forward to the future of the comic. Some of them might have decided to stop buying new issues because the things they looked forward to the most will never happen. At least under one measly writer. Flynn doesn't care about the fans who care about Surge and Kit. Evan will prove that too if she keeps humoring him. Unless he has the power to get her fired. She has nothing to gain from just humoring him now that he stepped away from the comic for a while. Which actually announced recently. I really hope I'm jumping the gun and Evan Stanley will finally fix the problem with these two. What kind of tone-deaf writer sets up a mystery that a major character cared about with no intention of resolving it? Literally agreeing with Starline that your past is irrelevant. That's creating a dangling plot thread with no intention to resolve it, which is exactly what Penders and Bullers were doing at the end of their run. It shouldn't matter what Flynn plans or doesn't plan to write when other people are writing too. I guess it's a bad example because Bullers was the head writer when Penders was around, so maybe Bullers had all the power, so he was allowed to completely humiliate some of Panders' characters in the Return to Angel Island arc. But if he wasn't the head writer, there would be a precedent for Evan being allowed to do something Flynn doesn't want to do. I don't know, I didn't get the sense that Archie had a head writer at that point. It felt more like there were two head writers. One was with Knuckles, one was with Sonic. While I love to see a ton of slapstick against Surge and Kit that shows the impact, you can do that by showing robots attack them too. And the comic can't be trusted to show enough slapstick against them anyways. It's not good enough for their fans or haters. If all the writers want to do is make them suffer, why don't they just skip to the part where they're getting hurt unless it's necessary to explain the story? Why are they completely confident in the evil team they just joined to succeed against people who vastly outnumber them anyways? When Kid has trust issues. What about having one more person will make Surge's plan to kill all the heroes any more likely to succeed? She should think she's guaranteed to anyways if Sonic's not there because she's too fast for anyone to handle. And in the next issue, Sonic's not gonna be here. He's not even responsible enough to stick around to protect the people here. A lot of the story would be a waste of time if it's not setting up foreshadowing to her doing a 180 and not being annoying anymore. Sonic warned her something would happen to the idiot who tried to attack this place. My first instinct was to think that was written so she'd remember it. There's no good reason to do that otherwise. I can say the same about her being stunned that Amy told her no one's gonna force her to do stuff here. Why write that if it's not intended to change your mind? Why write that if it's not supposed to be important? We already know that Amy's a good person. I knew this issue would disappoint me. That's why I waited so long to review this. Making her a hero would be brilliant because she's obviously a replacement for Scourge, and this is something that they never do with Scourge. Every time the comic seems too good to be true, it is. You don't have a good arc when you want it to end from the start. I didn't feel that way about the Ixis chase. I can understand someone thinking it'd be disrespectful to Surge to make her do a complete 180 because she hates Sonic, but it would be respectful to the person Surge used to be. If the first time we saw Surge, she wasn't brainwashed, people might not be thinking of her brainwashed self as her true self that should stay that way. Normal storytelling is in chronological order. And not telling a few stories in chronological order is something Panders did a few times, and it was confusing. Normal storytelling would have us see when she first got kidnapped, or volunteered to get superpowers, ideally. I'm sure writing in chronological order is what any professional would do there, because they're supposed to show people the important scenes. Why was I too lazy to show that scene to build suspense and progress the plot? But I had an entire issue about this boredom with the same excuses. It's like he didn't want people to care about the real Surge, because then he'd have to put in the effort of making her not the new Scourge anymore. Even though we've already had more than enough of Scourge. I was just shocked to hear that there's actually some fans that say she's not the new Scourge, and are offended at the accusation, despite overwhelming evidence. I mean, you could literally tell people who don't read the comic about how they lost the right to Scourge, and they had to make a new green character with his powers called Surge, and they might not even believe you. The only explanation I can come up with is that they just hate Archie that much. Eventually everyone's gonna get tired of Surge. Why wouldn't you get tired of literally the same thing over and over? Giving her an excuse to stop annoying everyone is as easy as revealing that her brainwashing wore off. And it should, because its hypnosis was always temporary. I assumed the hypnosis could be made to last exponentially longer with repeated uses in a row. Even if it didn't work like that, why didn't he instantly brainwash Rouge to make her go home with him instead of the brainwashing being so short-lasting? He could have gotten her to get Tails at any time. He could have brainwashed all the heroes to go somewhere where they wouldn't be interrupted and given them amnesia when he wouldn't be able to keep up the brainwashing so they'd stop knowing to try to get away from him. That has to be why he could change Kid and Surge, because then he had all the time in the world to extend the brainwashing. It could only be extended so much though. The sheer fact that they didn't have the same amount of sessions with both of them proves they didn't have the motivation to brainwash them for literally as much as possible so that it would last like a year. because it's not like he gave them both 500 sessions. If it increased his power with every use after it was already done, he'd only need 1 session because the power number would get so high so fast. Because it would go like 1 time, 2 time, 4 time, 8 time. How's Eggman too dumb to invent a hypnotic device and do that? That's not the case in AOSTH. We already have Metal Sonic for a character whose role is to go fast while fighting Sonic. You can combine that with the fact that Eggman could give him electricity powers. And Surge is redundant. You could still have Surge be saying or entertaining dialogue in the same issue where Metal Sonic was doing something. This annoying issue by Ian Flynn was about Surge and Kit pretending to join the Restoration as double agents for Clutch in his plan to kill off its competition instead of it having the guts to actually make Surge stop being annoying. When I know Clutch will never succeed anyways. Because instead of Surge instantly electrocuting her enemies, she's gonna fight them in a drawn-out way, apparently to enjoy it for longer. Giving Sonic time to get there and have the exact same fight with her from issue 50. Unless it's impossible for them to call him because he didn't wisen up enough to have a risk communicator on at all times. Then if she and Kate get knocked out and handcuffed, I'll have to see a brainwashed teenage girl and 6-year-old get kept in jail for a decision they were incapable of not making. That'd be fun, if I was sadistic. If you have the next part of an arc to be too predictable, some people aren't even gonna buy it because they'll know they won't like it. Something's exciting if it's unpredictable. Usually action scenes are exciting because you don't know if the characters are gonna get hurt or not. But it's a kids' comic. You'd think they'd want to remind us that the mascot and his sidekick are cool every chance they get by having the mascot be responsible for giving them happy endings. AOSTH had Sonic unbrainwashed people. I don't understand why the writers are heartless against someone brainwashed. I didn't think Sega mandates applied to non-game characters too. If that was true, remember the mandate that Sega characters can't die? Flynn would have either been forbidden from doing what he did in issue 50 or have to lie to Sega that's temporary. And eventually Sega would force someone to use that character again. If the mandates don't apply to non-game characters, then they can have parents. Nicole got a dad in the reboot. Sally kept her dad. The writers just don't want to put in the effort of making parents. It's so weird because every other franchise doesn't do that. Her meeting and working for Clutch is such an easy idea to come up with that a fanfiction thought of it first. I don't see the value in getting it out of the way when it's just a few pages of new content. Of all the different bases he could have gone to, he just so happened to come here right before they're about to ditch the place. When there's so many different directions he could have gone. A writer with real guts would redeem her. Like how Evan tried to redeem Scourge in her fan comic. I say tried to because all it amounted to was him going to live with evil to call in a lifeless world. So it's just that he became neutral. The point is, Evan's not being held at gunpoint. I really don't see why she can't subvert what Flynn wants after he said he wasn't going to write for the comic for a while. If that comment I got that he was demoted from head writer was really true, he wouldn't have any kind of power over Evan anymore. And I don't know where that information came from. I assume she's just humoring Flynn because she thinks he's a nice person. Because otherwise it really defeats the point of demoting someone from head writer if the other writers are still doing whatever he says anyways. If he was demoted, I'd really like to know how, because how could he have done anything to piss him off that badly? I thought he just willingly stepped down from writing all the stories because work exhaustion and boredom.